an ironic media production.
Visit us at ironickmedia.com.
What advice do you have for other college students to manage college, to deal with it? How do you survive college? How do you get through?
What I would highly recommend is getting the help, getting the accommodations you need. Because even before I stepped foot on my campus that I transferred to, I already contacted student services. We had accommodations lined out. And then I started coming and I got connected with other people that, are really understanding. I've had help with assignments because for me with my pain, it's hard to write everything down. So I have some note takers. I have this one gal who helps me by writing things down. I'll speak verbally. I'm like, okay, for this assignment, I need this. Some of my professors know that I have CMT, the ones who have gotten to know me more. They're all very understanding.
Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Hey, we're on, Chris.
Oh, here we go. Hey,
Okay.
Hello, everyone. This is Chris and Lizzo.
We are a brother-sister team.
And on behalf of the Charcot-Marie Tooth Association, a.k.a. CMTA, we are coming at you.
Coming at you from coast to coast. I live in California, and Chris is in Vermont.
As usual, it's another fantastic episode of our famous podcast named what, Lizzo?
CMT for me.
That's right, CMT for me, a comprehensive podcast. We try to get everybody on this podcast that has CMT or has a story to share. We love to talk to fundraisers. We love to talk to doctors and really give people the voice, those that have CMT, to tell their stories and share their experiences. Sounds pretty good, huh?
It's great. It's going very well. So what have you been up to?
I was reflecting on that this morning. Pretty hectic here in Vermont. Work's extremely busy. I'm traveling to Massachusetts and back, checking in on my parents, packing swag from the Cycle for CMT event, having conference calls, et cetera, et cetera. And what I think about, I'm not getting enough sleep. I got all these puffy bags underneath my eyes.
I was going to say, those lines into your eyes and stuff.
Well, thank God my wife works for a cosmetic company. It'd be a hell of a lot worse. But we're getting through it. But I'm not finding enough for myself and some of the things I really like to do.
Chris, I don't see how you do that every day. I call you. You're just like, I have a meeting in 5 minutes.
Gotta go.
Gotta go. We must be from the same family, right? Because I'm always running around too. And I always struggle to get that correct balance between play, work, and relaxation. And I'm 58, still haven't got it down.
What do you mean by balance?
Balance.
Like balance on one foot?
No.
I run a laboratory. Do you mean like weighing out items on a balance? What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's what I mean. How do you balance on one foot all day long?
It's very, very hard. Don't know.
Dude, I mean life balance. Like how do you work, play, relax without creating chronic stress?
Now it's much clearer, Lizzo. I don't know about you, but life balance is challenging. And it is very important. What happens when you don't have a good balance in your life?
Oh, I'll tell you what happens. I get headaches. I'm really anxious. My heart feels like it's going to pound right out of my chest.
Nice.
And if I don't,
very good visual there. That'd be interesting if it actually popped out of your chest.
it would just, can you imagine my heart just beating so fast and it goes,
and I try to push it back in.
And then I'm like, push it back in. But if you don't honor the symptoms, it will make you feel depressed and down and unhappy. So it's really important to try to achieve that life balance. But, talking about life balance, Chris, we have someone that we're interviewing next. And she has valuable insight on pacing yourself to achieve maximal results. And she has a really interesting blog called Beauty in the Pain. One of her quotes is, we can find beauty all around us despite pain and suffering. And I thought that was a really cool quote to start off with.
I'm really excited to interview this guest. First off, Beauty in the Pain. That is interesting. I don't know how that surfaced in that title, but it's an awesome opportunity to explore this further. So, who is our guest, Lizzo?
Her name is Katerina.
All right. Hello, Katerina.
Hello. Nice to see you.
And awesome to have you on the show. You are going to be famous now. Be ready.
Going to be. She was already famous with her Beauty in the Pain blog. Come on, and her dancing.
All right. Well, we'll get to that. So, Katerina, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
It's so great to have you. You have such an incredible story. We're really excited. And just for our listeners, Lizzo and I do pre-interviews with individuals before. That is very enlightening. So we are so excited that she would dedicate the time to get on our podcast here. So let's just start with something very, very simple for our listeners, Katerina. Give us some background, like your age and where you live, maybe what type of CMT you have.
Yeah, I am 21, a college student, and I live in Southern California. I'm doing college in Southern California.
Yeah. And what year are you in school and where do you go to school?
I am a junior. And
Okay.
yeah, and I'm a transfer student. So I did community college first, and then I just transferred to a private Christian school.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are you studying in school?
I'm majoring in psychology, and my concentration is in child life. So my goal after college and after getting my master's is I want to be a child life specialist.
What is that though? A child life specialist? Like, can I be an adult life specialist?
So a child life specialist, what I would be doing is working with kids and children's hospitals, helping them cope with their diagnosis or their pain and helping them through that process of getting treatment. Any child that is dealing with an injury or some form of illness. And then what I would also be doing is just kind of helping the family cope with everything. And they plan events and stuff. So it's like,
wow, that takes a special individual to do that type of stuff, because I could not do that. I'd be just bawling all the time.
Exactly. And my thought is, as we continue this interview, there's got to be a link probably with what you've gone through in CMT that's pushed you in this direction, that's given you the passion to pursue this. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what type of CMT do you have?
I have a very rare type of CMT. It's called CMTRIC, which stands for recessive intermediate C. So it's a recessive type.
Are you the only one in your family to have CMT, Katerina?
No, I have 3 other siblings and we all have CMT.
Really? And do your parents have it?
Nope. With this type, it's recessive. So it came from a gene from both my parents. Basically, there's only a 25% chance that any of us would have this type. So really only one of us should have CMT.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So somehow we all ended up with CMT, just symptoms showing at different times. Until a few years ago when I was diagnosed, my family, we didn't think I had it.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So you're 21 and your diagnosis surfaced at what age? 19?
I was...
Wasn't it your senior year of high school? I read your blog.
Yeah, almost 18. I think it was like a month from my 18th.
18. So let's talk a little bit about your childhood and upbringing, just kind of what that was like and when you started to experience symptoms. And I don't know if you were extremely active when you were younger and things of that nature, but tell us a little bit about that growing up and not having this diagnosis until you were 18 or a senior in high school. What was that like?
So I grew up doing a lot of dance and I did sports. So I was very active, but dance has always been my passion. When I started, I kind of knew that that's where I was going to end up doing more of. I wanted to be a dance teacher, which I am today. So I really love that. Yeah. So I didn't have any symptoms show up until I was about 13. I started having a lot of fatigue and we had a lot of blood work done. I saw different doctors, but no one knew what it was.
And that is such a common story I hear from people, is achieving this diagnosis is a very lengthy process and can be hit or miss.
Katerina, what I don't understand, if your siblings had it, why didn't they think it was CMT, or are you the first one to have symptoms?
Well, I was so I started dealing with symptoms when I was 13, and then none of my siblings were diagnosed till about a year later. I had one sibling that was diagnosed. I had doctors that thought maybe I was depressed, maybe I had like mono, or they tried like everything. And then I started to get a little bit better. And so they didn't really think much of it, but the fatigue never like completely went away.
Yeah, they're probably just like, oh, you have chronic fatigue and you need to relax or whatever.
Yeah, take a nap during the day and you'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
You take a nap and you're not better.
Yeah.
Right,
and,
right.
Doctors are like, oh, maybe you're just depressed. I'm like, there's got to be something else.
Right. Keep going. This is interesting.
Yeah, then I started dealing with pain in my feet during my senior year of high school. It started with just nerve pain, a tingling sensation. I just thought part of it, I also have some back pain. So I thought maybe it's related to that. And then I got to the point where I wasn't able to be on my feet very long. I was a lot more fatigued. My family kind of started thinking, well, maybe there's something else going on. So I went and saw a specialist, and then he found out that I have CMT in my family. And so I was diagnosed with CMT. He noticed some weakness in my feet and my ankles, which at that point I was dancing quite a few hours a week. So I didn't think much of it. I'm like, how is that even possible? So it was really discouraging.
So Katerina, as a mom of a child with CMT, I can't imagine not having CMT and having your 4 children have CMT. First of all, I have 2 questions, 2-part. Do your siblings bond together and create sort of a social group or a support system for you? And number 2 is, how do your parents handle that? I mean, that's a lot to manage, like mentally and physically and financially.
Yeah. So it was really hard. I didn't have any other siblings that were diagnosed at that point until a little bit later. We knew that they had CMT because of the symptoms were shown. Like you could see signs in the feet changing and everything.
Yeah.
For me at first, I had a really hard time with it. I didn't really want people to know. Only a few close friends knew. And I really started dealing with a lot more depression. So I didn't really get involved in any communities until this past year. I felt like for me, at least, I did bond with my siblings because of, we all can relate in some way.
Yeah.
It's so hard because everyone's symptoms are different.
Right. And you have a period in time where you're dancing, you're very energetic. And not only until recently 18 or so, as you referenced, you start to feel tingling, you're still fatigued. That must be difficult. Did you cut down on dance, or were you like, I just got to work harder and dance more? I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. Leading up to before I was diagnosed, I started working a lot harder with dance because I was being told there's some weakness in your feet. And I just thought, I'm not working hard enough. And for me, dance has always been my passion.
Yeah.
So I would work a lot harder. And that now I think about, I'm like, well, that could have, triggered a little bit because I was doing more than someone with CMT should be.
Right.
And then when I was around the time I was diagnosed, I started dropping classes because it got too hard to do everything. I was constantly fatigued to the point where I couldn't really get up some mornings. So it was just really discouraging for me.
And I think about that, and just to talk a little bit more, and you're just such a positive person, which I'm always blown away when I interview individuals that have CMT. But I'm trying to think, you're only 18, going on 19, you have future plans and thoughts, and maybe thinking about earlier what you would do with your dance passion. So I can understand when you say depression, just how do you cope with that? And that must have been a very, very challenging time in your life. And you're only talking to a few individuals. You probably don't want everyone to know. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you're probably just hoping maybe this is just a short-term thing and this thing will go away. And you have a feeling probably of denial too.
Yeah, I did at first, at least. It was just really shocking because I believed for so many years, I'm like, oh, I'm fine. There's nothing going on. Like I'm dealing with some fatigue, but it's nothing major. But I also was getting diagnosed a few months before graduating high school. So for me, I'm just like, okay, now what do I do? How do I keep going when I know CMT is progressive and I see it in my siblings?
Right.
And for me, my symptoms changed. Everything changed almost overnight. I started dealing with a lot of pain. I had more symptoms show up like tremors and more weakness in my muscles. And it was really, really hard.
That's a very surprising kind of transition, how you just started all of a sudden having all this pain and everything. So going back to the beginning of our podcast, we talked about life balance. And I saw that you wrote something in your podcast about life balance. So what have you found through the process? Because you still are quite active. Just trying to schedule this podcast was really hard. And we're both on the West Coast, but you're working and you're this and that. And I was very surprised at how many things you're trying to fit in, yet you're achieving your balance or struggling to achieve balance and working on it.
I work on just doing small things at a time, make shorter goals. I don't do way too much, which is really hard for me because there's just so much I want to be involved with now.
I'm sure.
This year, sharing more of my story, I'm getting all of these opportunities and I'm like, oh, I want to do this, but there's just so much. So I just learned, if I notice that my pain's a lot worse, I'm just like, okay, we're going to stop, just going to rest. And if I can't get everything done today, then that's okay. And so what really helps me, at least, is I've been a part of different support groups or been talking with different friends that might also have some form of chronic pain and they understand. So we're just there encouraging each other. So I just learned to take things one at a time. Otherwise, I noticed that I start dealing with a lot of anxiety and just get really overwhelmed. And that could be hard for someone dealing with CMT or any form of chronic pain, as you know,
Sure.
that I can't keep going and not taking a break because then the next day I might not be able to do as much.
I just think that that's great advice for a number of our listeners. You set these shorter goals or like, hey, I really want to do this, but you also understand you need a break to be able to achieve that. So you've really continued, it sounds, to do some of those things that are really important to you, but maybe it's at somewhat of a slower pace, but you're not giving up, right? You've just kind of learned, how do I actually continue to do these things in the presence of CMT? And that's cool. Nice job on that. I'm telling you, it's got to be hard, not easy. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have very similar feelings.
Yeah. And Katerina, I'll be calling you after this to get some tips about life balance, and I'll write them down and
Yes.
I'll share those.
Especially with the psychology background.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're going to be in touch for a long period
long
of time.
This is a lifelong relationship now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Elizabeth, get your checkbook out and send her a check, will you?
I already did.
So can we talk a little bit about dance and or music? And I think Lizzo was telling me something about how active you were in dancing, and maybe she got that from your blog. Then there was some other reference to how you're still dancing, but tell us a little bit about that. And I hear chair dancing.
Yeah, so I've been dancing for a very long time, since I was little. It was never about being a professional dancer, which I'm really grateful for, because now I know that I couldn't achieve that goal if that was a goal I had in mind, but it wasn't. I just knew that teaching dance and teaching other kids to dance, and I dance with a Christian ministry. So I really use my faith just to be an encouragement to other people. So with dance now, since my CMT is continuing to progress and it's getting harder, I'm learning to adapt more. So I am doing, some people call it chair dancing. I call it seated dancing.
Seated dancing.
Well, I was trying to explain all that to Chris about what chair dancing was, and he just didn't understand it. Listen, this is what he thought.
And listen, I was thinking dancing does have an emotion to it, etc. So I was thinking, like, do you ever feel like your chair should have arms and reach out and give you a big hug? Have you ever got in the chair and it like broke and you fell down? Do you name your chair? I don't know, like your dance partner. So you got to explain the chair dancing thing to me. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around it.
Okay. I started with this. I didn't even know people did dancing, sitting down. I didn't know that until around the time after I was diagnosed. I would go to classes, and most of the time I couldn't stand on my feet the whole time doing ballet or jazz. So there was times where I had a chair on the side. I would sit down and just follow the arms and not do everything. It helped me with not using as much energy. And then I started getting these opportunities to do dance where I was sitting down and lead other people to do different movements. And that was just really beautiful. And so that's kind of what led me to teaching it. I didn't even think about naming my chair.
There you go.
I should do that now, Chris.
Right.
I'll tell everyone. All right. Well, I was on this podcast. I named my chair.
Yeah. Grab your partner.
Round and round.
But it's very cool that given CMT, your passion for dance, and then how you stumble onto something like this, that still gives you that incredible sense probably of feeling and a coping mechanism. And now you're sharing that with other people. That's got to make you feel pretty great.
Yeah, for me, it's hard at times because I grew up being able to do everything with what I was learning and do with all the other dancers in a class. But I've learned that this has just been a blessing for other people, because there might be others that have some form of disability or pain that aren't able to be standing on their feet. And what I tell some of my students is, well, I'm like, you can still dance even when you're sitting down. It's not a weakness, because for me, I used to think of sitting down as a weakness because it just means I don't have the ability to do everything.
And I read in your blog, you said that there's strength in weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was pretty great.
Very inspirational.
So I have a couple of questions about college. We have a lot of college students. We know a lot of college students, and they struggle going to college. Do you tell your teachers you have CMT or your professors? Do you try to find transportation on campus? Not everybody has transportation on campus. What advice do you have for other college students to manage college, to deal with it? How do you survive college? How do you get through?
What I would highly recommend is getting the help, getting the accommodations you need. Because even before I stepped foot on my campus that I transferred to, I already contacted student services. We had accommodations lined out. And then I started coming and I got connected with other people that, are really understanding. I've had help with assignments because for me, with my pain, it's hard to write everything down. So I have some note takers. I have this one gal who helps me by writing things down. I'll speak verbally. I'm like, okay, for this assignment, I need this. Some of my professors know that I have CMT, the ones who have gotten to know me more. They're all very understanding. And I would just encourage anyone who has CMT or any form of disability or chronic illness to get the help you need. It's out there. Taking that step of courage and asking, like, okay, I need this, because otherwise I'm not going to, I'm not going to make it through a whole semester. That's just really hard, right? So I've learned to go there and be like, okay, this is what I need. Another thing that's really helped is I will eat on my school cafeteria once a day, each day when I'm there. And standing in line is horrible.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue. And so I mentioned that to them. And now I have accommodations where I will email food services or what I want for each of those days. And then I come and I get it and I sit down.
Wow, that's great. It's really speaking up for yourself. And not all kids like to do that, or young adults like to do that, especially in your early 20s, right? To ask for help. Yeah. But it sounds like you're doing that. Was that hard at first to really get in that groove of like asking for help and special tools? And
oh, yeah, it was for sure, because I've grown up very introverted, very quiet. And I didn't want to be a burden to others. And then I felt like with college, I'm like, well, I don't want people to know I have a disability, because they might think of it as, oh, she's just not going to be able to do as well. So once I started asking, like, okay, I need accommodations for this, everyone's just been very helpful. And the friends I've gotten to know are all very encouraging. And they're like, okay, how can I help you?
It's a very interesting transition. From you have CMT, and like you said, you don't want to be treated differently.
Yeah.
And you don't want people to look at you differently. So then you refrain from asking help, because now you're exposing that you have this. But good for you, because that's got to be a very hard transition. And to get to that point to ask for that help.
Yeah, it was really hard at first. And then when I started doing that more this year, at least through sharing more of my story through my blog and different short testimony videos I've done. And I've realized that I'm being an advocate for myself, but I'm also doing it for others and being an encouragement to them to realize it's like, you don't have to be quiet about this. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean you don't have the ability to do other things that you still love. So for me, going to college, it's a big deal, because I deal with a lot of pain and fatigue every day, and it can be really hard and really discouraging. But then I wake up and I go to classes. And I'm like, if I can just do that, that's enough.
Yeah.
I'm learning now to ask for help, because everyone that has helped me, they all are doing it out of love and out of kindness. And that just means a lot.
That's a great way of looking at it, because as you get older, I know even myself, I have some foot issues, and asking for help is hard. It's very hard. And as you get older, you have to ask for help. I know an elderly man that doesn't want to ask for help, and he just had a stroke. It's part of life. We help each other, and you help others in different ways. So it comes back. That's wonderful.
I think what you said too is great. It brought tears to my eyes, being serious. People watch the news every day, and the news is so negative, right? Whether there's violence, et cetera. And what you said, there are great people out there. people that want to give back and help others and to come to terms to that, right? I think anybody with CMT, you will find those people. It sounds like you've developed some great relationships also as a result of this.
So I don't want to bash your siblings or anything, just to change the subject and get out of the emotional.
Oh, there we go with love. Now she's talking bash. So, okay, nice.
No, but I was just wondering, do your siblings look up to you? Do they all have that inner force, that inner fire that you do to continue on? Or is everybody just a little bit different, still grappling with the diagnosis?
I think just everyone's different.
Yeah.
One of my siblings, she does a lot of videoing and photography. She's really gifted in that. And I see her continuing to do all the things she loves. And that's an encouragement to me. Mm-hmm. And then even my youngest sister, and for her sharing with her friends of what CMT is. Because for me, when I was first diagnosed, I didn't want people to know.
Is that Ellie you're speaking about? Ellie, who did the dance for CMT? She's great.
Yeah. And for me to see how she's very open to being involved with the CMT and the youth is just an encouragement. I'm like, well, if I was her age and getting diagnosed, I don't know if I would have had the courage to do that.
Yeah.
Do people ever go up to you and say, why are you wearing braces, or what's the matter with your legs? I mean, it's inevitable that kids or, adults will say, what's going on? How do you react to that?
Yeah. So when I first got leg braces, it wasn't even a year since I was diagnosed that I ended up getting them because I wasn't able to walk very well and the fatigue so much. So I got leg braces and I covered them all the time for at least a year and a half. So most of my friends, people I've danced with, they didn't even know I had leg braces because I would take the braces off in the car and put my shoes on and walk to dance class. Like I didn't want anyone to know, or at least I didn't want my students to realize of how bad and how much my disability and everything has gotten worse. But now I wear and people see them. And if someone asks, they're like, I hope you're not offended by this, but what are those things on your legs? And I'm very open of sharing. Good. Because it just means that I'm sharing more about CMT, which is great because most people have never heard of it. And I'm sharing that I'm still able to do things like college, and I'm sharing about my faith and how far I've come. So I'm very open to it now. To anyone that will ask me, it could be someone from college, it could be someone at the grocery store. I'll just tell them about, what I have. And
what do you say? Because a lot of times when you try to explain CMT, they're just like, people look at you with eyes that are kind of glazed over, like
country music television. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't say the name at first because people were like, what in the world is that? They have no idea. And I don't blame them. When I first heard about CMT, I'm like, what does that actually mean? Right. What I usually will say is I have a neuromuscular disease because it affects, the nerves and the muscles. And depending on the age, if it's a kid, it's going to be a little different. If it's an adult, I can use more terms and they'll understand. And I basically will say that this is something that's genetic. So my nerves kind of slowly are dying off and I'm losing feeling in my hands and my feet. Like my muscles are getting weaker. So I wear these leg braces. So I'm able to walk more and have better balance because without my braces, my balance isn't as good. And so I usually, depending on, I can tell if they're really listening or if they're just kind of like, all right, I'm done. Yeah. And then if they ask, what's the name of it? I'll say, oh, it's Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease or CMT. If you look up CMT or look up the CMTA, depending on the person, some people want to know more, which is great. I try to make it as short as possible, but in a way that they're going to understand. And then for kids, it's a little different because sometimes, kids will notice if something's different about someone. So
always.
They're like, well, what is that? I don't know what leg braces are. And so I'll explain a little bit and say I have some problems with my feet and my legs. So I wear these so that I'm able to do more walking. And,
that's a good explanation.
And it's just something that's really short.
Sure.
Yeah.
Helpful. And, their parent might be with them and might ask more questions. Part of why I actually started showing my leg braces more, I would go to physical therapy. And where I went at the time a couple years ago, there's a lot of kids and most of them wore leg braces. I'm like, if they can wear AFOs that are seen and they're little, I can do that.
Good for you.
Yeah,
So
good for you.
That was what encouraged me. And so now I'm like, well, if they see my leg braces, that just means I get to share about CMT.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Do you feel your diagnosis CMT has really kind of shaped the person you are today? Whether that's what you're studying in school, whether it's that thought to start a blog, etc. And I always ask, if you didn't have CMT, would you be doing these same things?
To be honest, if I didn't have CMT, I don't think I would be doing things like a podcast or starting a blog.
Yeah.
Or sharing my story to be an encouragement to other people and speaking. I didn't used to like public speaking. I was always quiet. So the thought of standing in front of people terrified me. But I think because I've learned that with having pain and how hard it is, I've realized that I can still be an encouragement through dance, through writing, through all the things I really love, but use it in a way that can be inspiring to others. And so I have grown more as a person and also in my faith because I'm dealing with a chronic illness. I don't think before, I probably wouldn't be doing all of these things related to speaking at all if it wasn't for having CMT.
Yeah. And you're taking what you've learned from CMT and all of these things, which I love. You're not just focused on people with CMT. You're spreading this out to people, any type of chronic illness, etc., and finding ways to help those individuals. So you don't have just this narrow focus, which I think is awesome. You can have just a positive effect on a lot of people.
And especially you like working with children, and children with some of the same symptoms that you have, or pain and suffering and disability. And that takes a lot of courage because, again, I could not do that. So we're really in a better place because you're in it, in this world.
Definitely. I feel the same way. And just in terms of your public speaking, just so you know, you're much better public speaker than Lizzo. So she's learning from this dialogue today. So
yeah. So Katerina, you might end up doing this podcast moving forward with Chris. Because
maybe you and I are
out of the water. Now. Yeah. It'll be Katerina and Chris. Chris and Cato.
We'll have to change it. Katerina.
Katerina and Chris.
Or maybe, maybe down the road I'll start one and then you both can come and speak.
Well, hold on. Now she's giving competition.
Okay.
We don't like that.
Here we go.
Okay, we got to end this.
Okay, podcast is over. No, but in all honesty, we are coming to the close of our podcast. But one question Lizzo and I always like to ask, and you've said a lot of awesome things through this, but if someone tuned in as a listener to the last 2 minutes of this podcast, unfortunately, what advice or what would you like to say to the CMT community? And that's whether it's parents bringing up a child with CMT, someone with CMT, early in diagnosis or in diagnosis, et cetera. What advice would you like to give to our listeners?
I would say don't give up. Don't let the CMT fully define who you are as a person. Just because you deal with pain doesn't mean life is over. There's so many new opportunities out there. And I would also encourage for everyone to find the support. There's a lot of new support groups. There's a lot of Facebook, Instagram, any social media groups with CMT, and just get to know others that understand what you're going through. And for parents to get to know other parents that have children with CMT, because that's just a big part of having something like CMT that's not very well known, is getting support. I would just finish off with get support, because you'll find encouragement through that. And it will just help you continue going through this journey of life and living with CMT.
Words of wisdom there, folks.
Chris, I was thinking, she says she's a self-proclaimed introvert, but in 10 years from now, she's going to be standing on a box and like telling people what to do and just talking about CMT, really outgoing. And you're headed that direction because you've done a wonderful job here today.
Yeah, unbelievable. Very inspirational. We're so glad to have you. One thing, Lizzo, for listeners too, where would they go to visit Katerina's blog?
So my blog is beautyinthepainblog.com.
Beautyinthepainblog.com. Okay.
Yep. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's just Beauty in the Pain blog.
Thank you for being on this podcast, Katerina. And folks, that's close to a wrap. One thing I do want to remind you, though, should you decide to take up chair dancing, find a name for your partner. And I've thought of a few. Woodmere, Sir Boring, because there's not a lot of action there. What about Mrs. Standstill or Junior Hardbottom, right? Not all chairs have cushions. So just a few things to get the brain thinking here. Should you pick that up? And maybe you can post something or reach out to Katerina for those suggestions.
Okay.
So, Lizzo, just thinking about coping. Wasn't there a book out there written by folks from the CMT community?
Yeah, we put together a book of 101 tips, and it's called 101 Practical Tips for Dealing with Charcot-Marie-Tooth Disease. And although we don't have the hard copy anymore, it is sold on Kindle, and you can get it through Amazon for $7.95. It was a very popular book, and there are so many tips in there for dealing with CMT. It's really a very small investment for a large outcome.
Lizzo, we've been getting some feedback from some of our listeners. Has anything surfaced in the last week?
You know, I was talking with a gentleman who did the cycle for CMT, and he said, boy, we really like that podcast. I said, oh, you listened to it. He said, you know, I came home and my wife was sitting there after listening to the podcast, and she was crying. And she wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because she listened to Aaron and Emily, and she empathized with those two young women. Their courage and the way that they spoke about CMT and embraced it really affected her emotionally. And since then, she's been more open about her CMT. She got out her cane. She's been using it. And thanks to the inspiration of our young adults and our podcast interviewees. So there you go.
Wow. That blows my mind. I mean, it just is a good feeling inside that the podcast is having an impact. And, you know, that's why we're doing it, folks. And more importantly, it's hearing from our guest speakers that have a lot to offer. So that's cool. So if someone, Lizzo, wants to learn more about CMT, where should they go?
Oh, definitely go to the CMTA website, www.cmtausa.org.
And one thing I will say, it does take a lot of money to fund research. And in order to find a cure for CMT, we really would appreciate if anybody is so inclined to make a donation. You should go
CMTAUSA.org. And so to all our listeners, do you have a good story? Would you like to tell your story on our CMT for Me podcast? If you do, write to us at info@cmtausa.org and pitch your idea. Tell us a little bit about you. We really do want to hear from you.
Time to go. Peace and love, girl.
Peace and love, bro.
Till
Peace
next
and love,
time.
Katerina.
Later, Katerina.
Bye.
Bye.